Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Cody. Every time I post, photos or videos collecting eggs, I get a million questions asking how I set up my tree monitor nest box, and figured it was finally time to actually go ahead and just make a video on how I do it, and explain it in pretty good detail. Clearly, I'm using cork tubes rather than the traditional tub method, so it's quite a bit different than what you would normally see. I adapted this for a couple of reasons that I'll get into. But yeah, I'll just jump straight into it and show you guys how I do it. First thing I'll start with is the substrate or the nesting medium, whatever you want to call it. It's very simple. I feel like people overcomplicate this a lot. It doesn't need to be any crazy mix. I've seen people use just topsoil, even just sand. What I find that works for me is I do a mix that's 60% cocoa fiber, about 40% sand, that you could see here. I just, used a brick cocoa and, play sand from Home Depot. Nothing crazy. You just want it to hold a burrow and hold moisture for a long time. And so that's the only necessity here. Even just straight sand will do that. Um, you know, I never tried that method of just sand. I've seen a bunch of people do it though, and it works just fine for them. So, who's to say? But you can play around with it. Like I said, the only thing that really matters is holds a burrow and holds humidity. But I mean, you could see I just add some cocoa, add some sand, I give it a good spray, and then I'll end up mixing it around. And I'll do that quite a few times until I find a consistency that I'm happy with. So here we are, about 5-10 minutes and a gallon of water later, and it's finally to a consistency that I'm happy with. I try to slightly overwater it because with this method it's going to dry out like quite a bit faster than the normal method would. But you can see the tried and true test is stick a finger in it and it'll hold a burrow the shape of your finger. um, but yeah, you can see I can pack it down well. It's going to hold. But this is a very crucial step. Properly hydrated substrate can be extremely detrimental to the health of your eggs. So now, the star of the show. And it's very simple. It's, a decent sized cork tube with some garden liner, the same stuff that you would use to create a substrate layer in your enclosure. And you just cut that to the shape of the end of the cork tube and you hot glue it on. And once again, another very simple, straightforward part. You pack the cork tube with dirt. and and you want to pack it tight because if it's really loose, it's not going to hold a burrow, right? So you fill it up as much as you can. You cram your hand down in there to make sure it's as tight in there as possible, and the garden liner will hold it on there just fine, so none of it spills out the other end. And then just add whatever more in that you can on top, and that's it. It's very easy. And for size, I find this or slightly bigger is good. You don't want to go smaller than this, and you don't want to go way bigger. I've made a few of them now, and this is still by far my favorite one. But I would say the front of this is about 6 inches wide and 7 to 8 inches like bottom to top, and then the actual cork tube itself is about 2 feet long. And I always end up wasting my time here. I try to like pre-start a hole for her, and then she ends up caving it in and then making her own anyway. But here it is going in the enclosure, and you can see I strategically placed that piece of tree bark running across the middle there as a support to hold it upright. I don't want it, perfectly horizontal. I don't want it completely vertical. I like it at an angle like that. It gives a good gradient as well. You could see she's totally thrilled. She was very gravid at this point. This was about 1 week before she laid eggs, but she's still just totally as chill as could be. A little bit too active for my liking. While this gravid, you'll end up seeing at the end of the video, she laid a bunch of eggs. But I place this nest right where I do, specifically for the fact that monitor lizards in general like the gradient of 82, 83 up to like 86, 87 to lay their eggs in. So what I did was I took my temp gun and I just found a spot in the enclosure that ranges to about that temp, right? So on the top it's about 87, 88, and on the bottom it's probably 82, 83. And so that's specifically where I sought out to place the nest box here. The big advantage of this is you don't need an extra heating element. I don't want to run more heat cables and all this stuff into the enclosure. I'm just using the natural heat gradient in the enclosure. You can see how curious she gets every time I put the nest box in. The second I put her on it, she's all over it, checking it out, smelling it, because she recognizes it. You know, she does this 3 or 4 times a year, and it sits in, you know, the living room or the garage in between. And monitors are very curious, and she wants to investigate it and see what the new thing is that's in her home. So I'm obviously recording this part of the audio and editing. I just wanted to point out, typically she's so much farther down in that nest box, and I knew it was odd how far forward she was, and figured out the enclosure was much colder this time around. It was because one of the basking lights had burnt out, but I didn't have her normal bulb to replace it with, so I replaced it with a lower wattage, and I forgot. And that dropped the temp that she's laying at by probably 2 or 3 degrees, and that was enough to bring her from the bottom of the nest box all the way up to the top of it where she's laying her eggs. So even as something as subtle as that, these animals give us so many signs, and we just have to know how to, you know, interpret them. All right, she just came out of the box on her own. You can feel around for eggs. There's nothing left in her. So I'm assuming, yeah, there they are right there. There's at least 2 right on the edge. She might have laid some more down. Jesus, she laid them right up top. Okay, let me go grab these. All right, I'm guessing what happened is she got cold in the middle of the night, so she started laying them up towards the front more. But you can see there's a tunnel all the way down in there. And you can see how much more hydrated the bedding is down there. Hoping there's a couple more. I see at least one more. But all I do is just gently start scooping away at the bedding. And you can see how nice and hydrated the stuff that was just under the surface is. But this is nice because I don't have to search around a big tub to try to find them and possibly miss them. Like, I can guarantee they're in a small space. And like, look at this. They're just so perfectly dug in there. Yeah, so there's 2 right there. It would be sweet if there was a 5th one. I'm not counting on it. There's only ever been a 5th one once. I'm just trying to gently pull it out of the nice little mound that it's in. Oh, there's a 5th one. Let's go. Hell yeah. Look at that. I knew she was big. I knew there had to be at least 4. A couple of these are like ever so slightly odd shaped, but they still look good. Now I'm just gonna start dumping it over on this side. I literally just got back from getting food and saw she had came out. And I'm like, oh, well, time to move. And that's the farthest she dug down. But you can see, like, she dug to about here. Sometimes she'll dig down to about here and drop them, but usually that's about where she goes. And yeah, the rest of this is still nice and like tough packed in there from when I first did this. So now all I'm gonna do is grab these 3 and put them in with the other 2. Some of them are a little odd shaped, like this one is pretty rounded on the bottom. This one's pretty rounded on the top. But I don't see any discoloration, so this might be 5 good eggs. That would be fucking sick. All I'm gonna hope for really is 3 or 4. If I get 3 or 4 to hatch, I'll be happy. But yeah, now this is gonna go back in storage, and this girl is gonna get a good meal. I will say there are pros and cons to my method. I do this specifically because if you look, there's not a lot of room to fit a tub, right? with like the doors set up and stuff. So like if I was in this enclosure, I could easily put a tub in the bottom because there's all this room. These have small doors. Sorry, she shit on the window again. But these have small enough doors that it's hard to fit an appropriate sized tub in here. Plus, I filled the walls in so thick that it makes it even harder to fit a tub in. So this wasn't my first choice. This was the product of I need to figure something out ASAP, and that's what I came up with. With that said, it works really, really well. She's been laying like this for, 2.5 years now. That was the first time she's ever laid eggs on the rim. And like I said, I think it was because it was cold this morning. My take is whatever you do, provide variety. So if you want to do the arboreal one, maybe do the ground one too, and vice versa, especially with first time breeders, they don't know what the hell they're doing. So the best thing that you can do is just give them options. I've been leaving her lights on 24/7 for the last 3 or 4 days to make sure it was at temp day and night, and then just turning the UV off. So, but yeah, anyways, done ranting. Hopefully this was helpful. Any more suggestions on videos and stuff, let me know. I'll make them. I just replanted this enclosure and got a fancy new grow light in here. Giving it a few weeks before I really say for sure, hey, buy this product. We're kind of testing it out. But so far, it's looking great. These plants are looking good. Hopefully I don't kill them this time. But yeah, have a good one.